Hey, this is Dave with Taboo Customs. This video today, we're going to be installing one of our rust repair kits on this 2004 Toyota 4Runner behind us. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the center section of this 4Runner, close to where the fuel tank mounts, basically from the transmission cross member back to the lower control arm on the frame. So first, let's take a look at the frame and see why we need to repair this frame here for rust issues. So if you're familiar with Toyotas, you're familiar with them having some rust issues. The 4Runners, no exception here. This is the driver's side of the frame. Up there you can see this is actually the cross member for the rear of the transmission. Small rust hole behind that. As we move farther down, rust hole where the two frame pieces meet. It's rusting out on the bottom as well. And then as we go back to the lower control arm area, you can see rust starting to put a hole just in front of that lower control arm and a lot of it underneath. Now the outside of this frame is actually in really good shape. It's really just the inside. And a lot of times the fuel tank sits right here, so it'll hide a lot of this rust. Anyway, this will be the area that we are looking to fix. So now let's take a look at the kit we're going to use. So here's the Taboo Customs kit that we'll be using to repair this rust. And we try to design these kits to cover as much as this normal rust as possible. If you have really severe rust, though, there's a chance that this kit will not be enough for you. So you may have to add to this kit, you might have to do a different kit, or in general, it just may not be fixable. For this kit, the middle piece there is the bottom piece. The piece towards the bottom of this video is actually the outside piece, and the two longer pieces at the top are the inside pieces. The small pieces at the very top are actually to tie in the rear transmission cross member and the fuel tank cross member. So the first thing we'll need to do is we will need to start cleaning up the frame, which in itself is quite a process. So let's take a look. All right, so to start with, what we're going to do is we're going to use our needle scaler, and we're going to go in. We're going to get all of the areas here that this kit will mount up to. If you have a question about how the kit mounts up, use the kit to show you, where we're going to hit. We're going to make sure we really get the corner where that is made with that cross member. Same thing back here along this lower control arm. So we're going to want to make sure we tie that in good and around this cross member that can really be pretty rusty. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use the bottom piece. There's a couple of larger holes in the bottom piece, and that is areas that we're going to go in, cut open the bottom of the frame so that we can scrape out the inside of the frame, pull as much debris out of the bottom of the frame as we can. A lot of issues with these frames is that people don't put drain holes in them, then they end up filling with mud and sand, debris, salt, whatever, then they will just rust out. So we're going to go ahead, open up a couple holes, clean those out, and then those will be drain holes for the future. But first we got to go get all of our PPE on and get to needle scanning, which this is the part not going to be a whole lot of fun. All right, so the next step is we're going to want to take the inside, the outside, and the bottom plate, put them in location on the frame, and mark out where we are going to have to weld those plates to the frame. Then we're going to go in, clean up this frame using a 90-degree die grinder, straight die grinder, a wire wheel, something. You just have to make sure you get all of the rust off of there. You want to get as good a welds to the frame as possible. Now we're going to do that, and we're also going to look at some of the weld seams and other areas that might keep these from sitting flush against the frame, or what we're going to do too is we're also going to put all these plates up here. Once we get all this done, we're going to tack them together and pull it down as assembly so we can weld it offline from the vehicle. It's a lot easier to weld these long seams along the bottom if it's not overhead. So we're going to want to make sure that we can slip that piece, once we have the assembly welded, back on there. So anything that would keep us from being able to slide this on, we want to get rid of. So inside, bottom, outside piece, mark it out, clean it up as best you can. We got to get to work. All right, so now that we've got all of our edges cleaned up, we're going to start tacking together our parts. We're going to start with the inside plate and the bottom plate. So luckily on the driver's side here, we've got bolt holes in the bottom, we've got holes in the side on the inside here that can hold these plates, at least up there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to line up the plates in the front, and we're going to get those plates to where when they come together, they make a V at that joint. We don't want them overlapping like this. We want that open V so that whenever we take them off and we weld on the outside, we've got basically a V groove in there to weld in. So we'll get it lined up, evened up, and then we're just gonna tack the corner so that we can start lining up everything else. So now that we've got the front one tacked, we're going to want to take our vice grip clamp here in the middle. Because this frame does dip in, this inside piece needs to bow in. We're going to make sure you get that bowed in when you tack it to this piece, because we don't want it to not fit when we go to put it back together. And then what you can do is come back here to the back of this piece, or actually, sorry, in the center of this piece, tack it in here, and then we'll come back to the back of the piece and we'll tack it again. Once you've got it in place, you can place several tacks down along here. You don't want it moving whenever we take it off. Now we can work on the back piece and work on the outside piece.
don't really have to worry about it being real snug up against the bottom of the frame. Right now it's moving around. Really want to make sure we just set that distance, that width of the frame correctly, so that we go to put it back in, it'll be pretty well square. Now we can do the outside piece, and what we'll do is we'll use our vice grip clamp just to hold that outside piece in place so that we can tack it along the outside edge. Now what I'll do once I get that done is I'll pull everything off, and then I will weld inside, and then I will go and weld the outside. When I do that, I'll leave a couple inches down here at the lower control arm end unwelded, just in case we need to open it up to go around the lower control arm when we go to put it back in there. Okay, so now we basically got our frame rail for that side. Like I said, we will weld down the inside. Now you gotta be careful when you do that. You don't want a huge weld in here. You get a lot of spatter or something in here, you have to grind it out. You're gonna want it to get up as close to the frame as possible. Then we'll go out and we will weld the outside solid as well. We're gonna take this over to our weld table to do that. So we'll be back in a minute. All right, so we've welded up our assembly on the outside and on the inside. We've also gone in and sprayed the inside with a 3M Weld Thru Primer. That way we have a coating of something on that raw material that's on the inside. What you're gonna wanna do then is to start by sliding the rear over the rear control arm mount. Push up. You may have to adjust it with a hammer. If you need to adjust it front to rear, you stick a tube in these bottom holes. Go either front or rear. Looks pretty good. You can look through the holes and see how close you are to the bottom. We're actually right up against the bottom. What we're going to do is use our jack here to make sure we are all the way up. So with just a little bit of pressure, making sure we're pushing that all the way up. And we'll come back here, we'll do it at the back as well. We're going to use some vice grip clamps and the C-clamps to clamp inward on the sides, get them up close to the frame, and then we'll start tacking it on the inside here and then on the outside. And then we'll be able to come back and solid weld that and add in a couple other tie-ins here in a moment. If you have to, you can use a hammer also to get the gaps closed. In some areas, you're just going to have some gaps that you aren't going to be able to get closed, such as areas where these seams are and where the welds are. We're going to go in, we want to try to weld as much as possible, but going to be nearly impossible to get 100% weld across all of these seams. There's going to be an area, either the metal is not going to weld very well, or there's going to be too large of a gap. So you want to weld as much as possible to do this. Okay, so we've got our main frame rail assembly tacked into place, closed up most of the gaps. Some of them will end up having to close up when we're doing our solid welding. A lot of times as you're welding, if you can weld up, what's nice, you warm up the material, you can close it up with a hammer in some of those places where you have some gaps and you just want to close up some narrower spaces. What we need to do now is we need to add the last two tie-in pieces. We've got one here that will go to this cross member here that runs just above the fuel tank. Basically, you just need to mark it out, clean it up again, put it into place. You can take a hammer, use it to form it a little bit to get it to form to that cross member a little bit better. And then we've got this piece which will go against the transmission cross member, and you kind of be able to put it right up there, up against your new material, be able to weld it solid. That same thing, you'll have to maybe form that a little bit because that cross member doesn't go straight across, it does kind of neck in. So make sure you do that. Once you get those two in place and tacked up, you can just weld everything solid. All right, the outside, pretty much the same, everything just solid welded as much as possible. So now I just need to clean it up, prime and paint it. All right, so that'll do it for our install of our center section kit here on this Toyota 4Runner. If you have any questions or you'd like to purchase one of these kits, you can reach us on taboocustoms.com, or you can find us also on Facebook and Instagram. And thank you for watching. As always, a like or subscribe is greatly appreciated.